Recognizing risk factors of mental health in college students. We hope that after watching this video, you'll be able to better understand how different risk factors can lead to mental health disorders that are prevalent in college students. And we hope you'll be able to better recognize common risk factors in ourselves and our peers to better promote mental health. What is a risk factor? Risk factors are characteristics or conditions, such as biological, psychological, social, or spiritual, that increase the possibility of experiencing poor mental health. The first type of risk factor that we will be discussing here today are biological risk factors. These are things that you are born with or circumstances one is born into. Here, I've divided them into several general categories of genetics/family history, personal history, and social history. Genetics and family history of mental health disorders is one of the strongest predictors of mental health. For example, there have been studies that have identified a specific gene that will lead to the development of schizophrenia. Other conditions that have strong ties to family history and genetics include depression and bipolar disorder. Aside from family history, your individual history can also be a risk factor for mental illness. Individuals who suffer from traumatic brain injuries can cause personality changes, including impulsivity, severe irritability, affective instability, and apathy, and conditions such as PTSD and depression. Those who suffer from chronic medical conditions are more susceptible to mental illness as well, as coping with the mental and physical demands of their condition can take a toll on an individual's well-being, often leading them to develop depression and anxiety. The environment you expose your body to can influence development of mental illness as well, especially during college. Students often develop unhealthy sleeping and nutrition habits, which affect the body and the mind. College students often turn to convenient options such as fast food for nutrition on a busy schedule. This can in turn impact their physical health and mental health. The use of drugs and alcohol in party culture has also been correlated with mental illnesses, such as depressive disorder, anxiety disorder, trauma and stress-related disorders, and other substance use disorders. Furthermore, bipolar disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and psychotic disorders such as schizophrenia and others can co-occur with alcohol use disorder. The next type of risk factors are psychological risk factors. There are several psychological factors that can increase a person's risk toward developing mental health conditions, but some of the most prevalent are stress, trauma, and view of self in the world. For college students, stress risk factors can come in many forms while balancing academics with social and personal life, and adjusting to a new environment and a new way of living. College is a massive transitional period of life, and many students face a new amount of stress that they are not used to, as they adjust to living in a new place, meeting new people, and handling an increased academic workload. This can make students susceptible to mental health problems, including anxiety and depression. Trauma risk factors can come in many forms, and there are many situations that could lead to trauma for different people. For example, abuse and neglect coming from a family, a romantic partner, or others, such as teachers or authority figures, could be traumatizing, and these could severely impact a person's psychological well-being. Additionally, experiencing a traumatic accident such as a car crash or natural disaster could cause significant trauma, especially if one is injured or loses a loved one. Finally, a person's view of themselves in the world can put them at risk of mental health issues. When entering college, students may develop insecurities and low self-esteem, and could possibly suffer from imposter syndrome, where they feel like they don't belong. This could lead to them having a negative worldview, in which they feel like everyone and everything is against them. All of these factors operating alone or in conjunction put college students at risk of developing mental health issues, particularly depression and anxiety. The next type of risk factor we're going to cover are social risk factors. One of those risk factors are loneliness. Commuting often makes it harder to build friendships as driving time limits opportunities to spend time on campus. Living off campus can feel isolating, draining of energy, and increase the risk of loneliness or depression. Another example would be peer pressure. Many college students may think they have to drink or use substances to fit in, but it can actually cause them to binge or be dependent, which worsens mental health. One more example is support systems. Students coming home from out of state are likely experiencing their first time being on their own, and their family and friends are miles away. They might feel homesick and isolated, like they have no one trustworthy to lean on at school. This can likely trigger feelings of depression. Furthermore, there are many students who do not have reliable and safe support systems within their family and can feel further isolated since they may be bouldering the weight of finances and academics with no familiar help or guidance. This can lead to increased stress and depression. The final type of risk factors we are going to cover today are spiritual risk factors. When we think about spiritual risk factors, the first thought is often related to religion. However, spiritual risk factors can also look at someone's place in the world and their environment. For a college student, these risk factors may look like feeling insignificant, having conflicting thoughts and beliefs, or having a flawed perception of themselves. With insignificance, a student might feel like this when they are feeling unimportant when they compare themselves to their peers. This could also mean they feel forgotten when it comes to finding their place in the world, or hopeless since they're not clicking with those around them the way they want to be. Conflicting thoughts is often another risk factor, since students are on their own for the first time. What they may be learning or experiencing in college does not always match what it was at home, and it may lead them to have an internal battle of forging their own beliefs or challenging those from their past. This can also lead to unresolved conflicts in their beliefs, which would potentially lead to an unknowing of who they are or shame from deviating from what they knew. Flawed perception is a very common risk factor among college students because they will likely interpret their failures or struggles as proof of them being spiritually or morally flawed. Students will often internalize these flaws, which increases any feelings of guilt, unworthiness, or shame. Let's go through an example scenario and see if you can identify the student's risk factors. Will is in his second week of his freshman year of college. His classes are starting to ramp up in the difficulty, and he finds it hard to complete all of his assignments on time. He was able to make new friends, but they have a lighter course load and have been inviting him to parties. Will finds it difficult to say no in fear of missing out, even though he has a lot of homework. Because of this, he tries to fit everything in and ends up sacrificing his sleep. This makes him sleepy in class, leading to him missing half of what the professors say in lecture. Pause the video and take a second to see if you can identify any risk factors in this scenario. There are many risk factors that Will has in this situation, some of which include the stress of finishing assignments, peer pressure from his friends to go out with them, and the lack of sleep he's getting trying to fit everything into his schedule. If this scenario sounds familiar to you and reminds you of any of your friends or even yourself, there are several steps you can take to help yourself out or them out. First of them, you can create a set schedule and block out time for assignments. Another solution would be finishing your assignments early so you don't have to worry about them later, allowing you to hang out with friends, take some time to yourself, or catch up on sleep. Thanks for watching today. We covered how risk factors common with college students can lead to poor mental health conditions, and that recognizing common risk factors in an example scenario in ourselves and in our peers can promote better mental health. Thanks for watching!